of success, work, studying, and yet also relaxation and ease. And we have several keywords in the middle, such as cool, helpful, students, calm, understanding, mental, that sort of thing. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our market. So our target market would be high school students, more specifically high school students who are motivated and driven, but lack a little bit of concentration when they're studying or trying to work. And so basically we decided that for our product to work for them, aromatherapy obviously, that it needs to have, our product must have a stimulating scent for aromatherapy, as well as a soothing or relaxing appearance. And it should be easy and safe to use, because if you're having study papers, work, pencils, all things near a flame, it has to be safe. As well as having a compact design so it can fit on desk or workspace, and also be storable, so it needs to have a lid or something to stack or be able to store in an easy place.
Okay, so our initial idea when we were brainstorming together as a group was to have an aromatherapy candle, so it would stimulate different parts of the brain that you usually wouldn't get if you weren't smelling these certain scents. So our candle was going to be freestanding with a bright flame and a medium wick with soy wax because it burns cleaner. And it was going to last up to 8 hours, so it could be used for, let's say, 4 study sessions, and it was going to be in a little simple packaging box. When we came back to our idea, we decided that it would be better if it was in a mason jar because there wouldn't be any chance of a fire hazard with the flame being open in your papers. And then it was also practical packaging because it would be easier to store, it would be recyclable, and it just would keep it cleaner. So wax drips down, it wouldn't happen with this. And then we also decided instead of soy wax, we would use paraffin wax because as a startup company, we needed something cheaper to work with and to create our models with. The brightness of flame, that became a non-factor because we were going to focus more on the scents and not, this candle wasn't supposed to be used for seeing paper by. That's what our main candle, this is what it turned out to be.
I'm going to talk a little bit about some market feedback that we did. And so basically we took some surveys and we talked to some different people out in the marketplace. And we decided that basically from their feedback, different iterations and changes and modifications that we would make to our product. So a couple of the main things that we ended up finding out was that they liked our product because it was very relaxing and they had felt stressed and distracted before. They definitely liked the brand name Opus, and so we decided to stick with that. They favored a smaller size for storability and other reasons that we've said before, such as like fitting on desk and being able to stack it and things like that. And so basically they preferred a simple, clean, and organized design and packaging, similar to the idea, which would be not distracting, very simple, and relaxing.
Okay, so our third iteration was made off of the feedback that Lexi just went over. So our 2 scents we picked were tangerine and rosemary, which we have found articles that prove that tangerine is de-stressing, whereas rosemary is focus and concentration. And as people were distracted or stressed out when studying, we felt these would really target the these would be the right kind of
It would
product for our
yeah.
market. And then we picked a smaller size mason jar as people said that they wanted a smaller size for desks and such. And then we picked 2 wicks twisted together because in our test it seemed to burn the longest. And then we also picked 1 milliliter of scent because we decided that wasn't it wouldn't be too overwhelming, but it would also activate your brain so that the aromatherapy would play in.
So, of course, there's going to be competition when you go into any market. And so here we have a couple of different brand names, small and large companies that also create and produce candles. We have Big Dipper Waxworks, Yankee Candle, which is very popular, Bath and Body Works, Essence, Village Candle, all sorts of different places. But we decided that our edge, or our unique trait that was going to set us apart from other different companies in the market was going to be that these are candles by students for students, and it's going to be a local company to start. So as you can see in this little chart here, we have that ours is the only candle by students for students, and it's local. Basically none of the rest of them do anything like that. We only have a couple candles that are even just local in comparison to what we're trying to do. And so this allows us to come from a very unique angle and makes us very different from other companies, and therefore more desirable for different people who are looking for candles for study.
Alright, so financials. Our initial asking price per unit before tax and shipping is $8.99 because that fell as the most profitable on our graph between units sold and what people were willing to pay. And so what we gain per unit, our revenue per unit, is about $4.73, and the price of production per unit is $4.26, leading to about 111% profit if you use the equation revenue over price to manufacture, and that is before labor is factored in, because we could not get an accurate estimate as to how many candles one person could produce in an hour. And so our approximate startup cost is $136, and we project that that will be paid off with the sale of 30 units or in approximately 3 weeks to start out. We expect to sell about 10 units per week in the first, using only free advertising through the internet. That worked, yeah. Right. So this is our graph of our fixed costs and our variable costs per unit. As you can see over there, that is what we use to create one unit, which adds up to $4.26, is what I remember. And this graph here is all of the materials we use for the testing to create our product.
Alright, so why our company is a good investment is we're filling a niche that really hasn't been catered to as a company that is selling to students from students and is going to be local. And we have an ability to expand as we are starting only in SAS, and then we're going to expand like one place at a time, following Facebook's kind of model, where we take one school at a time. And then we also have a large margin of profits, so we are going to put a lot of this profit back into our own company and help us expand. And then we also remain sustainable because we have low production costs, high selling price, and we're going to put our profits towards expansion. So going forward, we're going to improve our product, continue refining our packaging, and continue expanding. So for improving our product, you guys have all seen that it has a little bit of a divot in it, and opposed to the flat candle over there. And we tried, basically you need to pour it until it settles, and then you have to pour more. But we just didn't have enough time to really get it to settle. And so with more time, we'd be able to get it to become flat, and we also needed more time to melt and stir dye chips in our wax so that it would have less of this kind of white, flecky stuff in it.
Yeah, the cloud and then the divot, we both tested a couple of those things just through trials of other things. And so then we did a little bit of research to figure out how we could do that, and eventually just ended up being that we didn't have time in our prototypes, but we did look up different research and things in other studies to figure out how to edit those.
Changing our packaging to cater to the requests of our target group for our last survey. We changed the label so that we had information about the owl, about our company, about the aromatherapy qualities of the scent that you've selected. We got rid of the brain, we added color, we made it a little more streamlined and made certain features more prominent. We also hope in our final packaging design to glue the lid top together so you don't have to take off the two parts, it would just come off as one.
Okay, and then lastly is our expansion plan, which right now, as I've mentioned, we're just at SAS, we just have 2 scents, which are tangerine and rosemary, and we're just targeting high school students and their parents, and we just have 1 color and 1 size. However, in the end, we're hoping to expand not only to colleges and middle schools, but also to people with desk jobs, because we feel that activating the brain could also work well there, as they would have room for a candle on their desk, and it would improve their working. And then lastly, we have to do some more surveys to figure out what options our market would want, but there are 7 scents that are available. These are the ones we were thinking about adding, and then 4 more colors, also based on blue is a very common color and green is distressing, orange is very happy, and I think white is concentration. And then we were also thinking a second size would be nice, since people didn't really like buying candles very often. And so if we gave them a larger size, we thought that might be appealing to certain customers. And then we weren't sure, but we thought as a local company, giving a green aspect of our company might appeal to people. So we would want to maybe change some of the materials in our candles, even if that jacked up our price a little bit. We have such a high margin of profit that we think we could do that, especially with increasing our distribution and increasing our expansion. And then what our building, when we eventually rent a building, what it ran on, and then finally recycling program for our jars, so if you brought one back, you got the next one half off. That'd be nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. I think, as a group, you guys worked really well together in figuring out through the project sort of how to delegate and who's going to do what. And I saw a lot of good distribution of labor through the project. It seems like, in general, people are working effectively in class. So I saw a lot of good lab time, lots of good research being put into different elements. I think at this point, maybe open it up to some of our sort of judges or critics and see what kind of feedback they have for you guys, and then we can open it up to the rest of the class as well.
I'm curious how you will market it to the schools. Will it be selling in the store, or will you come on special occasions to sell them? How would you?
Our initial plan was to start out as a purely online-based company, because then we would, once we paid off our initial startup costs, use our initial, use our profits to go towards expanding and using, because we have a fair margin of profit, start using portions of that to expand to stores.
So an e-commerce site might be your first.
Shay started a Tumblr for us.
Yeah, so just getting the word out via word of mouth, and then also social media such as Facebook and Tumblr and Twitter. Just reaching out to fellow students, seeing as we are students and ourselves, so we could make connections that go through other schools as well.
Furthermore, we found that social media is very popular with high school students, so that would be a very easy way to send out word through our target market.
We even put a link on our little, it's in the brain right now, but
If you scan the box, at least the blog
the
that
Tumblr.
we've created.
yeah.
How many students actually did you actually buy candles for the desk?
Quite a few, actually.
Yeah.
Did you actually have research to that?
I'm not sure the number off the top of my head, but we did 3 different surveys. 2 were more like small focus groups, and 1 was a larger survey. And out of the larger survey, it was, I would say, at least like 2/3 said that they bought candles.
Yeah, 2/3 to 3/4 of kids said that they would buy some candles to decorate or to use for a specific reason.
Good. Well, I want to say, so far today, this is the best presentation. And I am very concerned when you were using the word aromatherapy and how you were going to solve this big concern about not fires, but you answered both those questions, which is very important to the fact of investor, that you guys actually provide solutions to a problem that you find. So I just got to say, you guys did a great job. And I like that you're trying to bring the guy with the pink shirt, tie, and the shorts. It's a good way to start a presentation.
Any questions?
I have some numbers questions. Your suggested retail price is $8.99. Now, how again did you come up with that number?
Okay, so we had a graph comparing how many units we projected to sell to how much we could charge, and we found about $8.99 would be the most profitable.
You would maximize your revenue at that point?
Yes.
It also falls in the middle of, we did a survey of what people sell candles like in jars or aromatherapy types candles, and some of them sold for about like $15 and some sold for as little as like $5.
Yeah.
And so we felt this would be kind of a middle price range.
We did research on those specific companies that we mentioned were competitors, as well as a couple other companies that we found, and that was what kind of comprised that graph of the demographic between like price and as well as how far they sell them, if they sell them nationwide, if it's only a region, and similar things like that to compare and decide on maximizing profit price.
And also, one last little nail in the coffin there is that we found when we were doing when we were conducting our surveys among our focus group, like our market that we would be catering these candles to, certain people were saying I would be willing to buy a candle for about $15, and certain people were saying like maybe $7 or $8. And so we kind of just factored in the fact that we are kind of an unknown company at this point, and so we want to build company trust before driving prices up. And we thought that $8.99 was kind of a safe price that people would feel comfortable with.
And were those other candles that you surveyed also packaged similarly in a glass with a lid?
Yeah, because many of the other companies had tons of different
Yeah.
variations, especially large companies like Yankee Candle and things like that were either nationwide or a very large portion of the United States or things like that. And so we found the specific candles that they were making that were similar to ours, and then took those results.
We also thought that we could make the price $8.99 because of the mason jar, and so once the candle burns off, what we were saying is that eventually we want to build our company so that you can return it and get 50% off the next candle. But also, before that happens, it's a mason jar that you can use after all the wax is burned off. So you're not getting just the candle, you're also getting the jar.
Nice set of drinking ware after all.
It is.
My big concern here is kind of building on what Sean said, is that I'm just not sure that there's enough here, that's different from what's already out there to warrant an existing market. Like it's a candle, it smells good, there's lots of candles that smell good, like it's in a mason jar. I could go to Zenith and pour myself like a candle, it's in the mason jar, and it is for students, by students, but how do you exploit that? So I guess my question was, if I gave you 2 weeks and $500 to go big, what would you do? Because right now I'm just seeing another candle. I like the premise of for students, by students, but I don't see an implementation that's going to actually work against the existing things that are out there.
We were gonna kind of market in the schools. We found people were more responsive and liked our candle product better when we actually went and go to talk to them about it versus we had an online survey, and we didn't get as positive remarks towards us. I felt like if we actually went out there and said hey, I actually use this candle, I really like it, it works really well, and as a student talking to another student, it's like your friend, your peer, and I feel like that's less imposing.
Yeah, but you
and
said you're going to do this as a startup online.
It is online, but I also, since we're going one place at a time, we're going
Contradictory.
one place at a time, though, so we would have time to go out and market it ourselves. We wouldn't be paying for anything. It'd be kind of our word of mouth, and then hopefully people at our schools word of mouth, and that way it's kind of spreading through people and through social media and not through advertising.
Right. So you're saying that our product is not particularly unique in an already established marketplace, and realistically, the candle itself doesn't stand out too much. But the thing is, we've found that none of the major companies in the pre-established market advertise directly to students, and while that can be perceived as a bit of a niche market, it's an untapped market.
What's your promise to get the student to buy it? I mean, I get it, it's for students, by students, but frankly, I'm a student, I don't care if it's by other students. Maybe I'm not a very nice student, but I'm an honest student. What's your benefit to me?
Rather than pushing the idea that our selling product is made by students and you should buy it because it's by students, I think we should push the initial idea we had, which is the whole it's a brain stimulant. And
Okay, so you got $500. How do you do that?
I think
2
for
weeks.
$500, what we would do is we would do more research into what areas of the brain that certain scents stimulate, and then we could put out our research, and that would be helping to promote our product. So if a student has a certain problem that they're struggling with, like concentration, then we can say these are the scents that are available to you, and this is how they'll affect your studying. And I think that that's what would set us apart.
Furthermore, we found that in high school many things trend, and so if one or two people find something that's really cool, lots of other people start to like that idea, and that could be a very positive factor in the selling and the spreading of our product becoming popular in different schools, different places, because trending works very well.
Especially in student areas where everybody's very compressed every day in a small amount of space, and everybody's talking. So it would be a good market. It would be a good. I think it would set up a chain reaction.
It's cool.
We have some other questions. Are we cool?
Oh, yeah, you guys. Yep.
Jordan?
So I have several questions actually. The first one is, so paraffin wax is not actually very beneficial for your health, and I know that you said it was a lot cheaper, but I feel like if you mentioned, I mean, I didn't look too closely at the packaging, but obviously there should be some sort of ingredient list on there, and I know personally for me, I try to avoid buying candles with paraffin in them, so that is just something to mention. Also, you'd probably have to be in a relatively well-ventilated room to do this, so that sort of adds an element of hassle. And also, about the local thing with the schools. So, one of your selling points was it's local, another one was it's by students, and another one was it's for students. So Sam already said that, oh, we're not gonna push the by students thing, and so, the local thing is kind of questionable because you'd have to expand, because you're only local to one place. You wouldn't be local to anywhere else, and there's only so much of any one market. Like, even if you took over all of the student candle market in Seattle, you wouldn't really be, like, tremendously huge. So, I mean, you have to establish a local personality in every market that you want to enter into, and also, so the last one that remains
Is there a question there?
Yeah, this is a debate, clearly.
So like I understand what you're saying, like the whole like ideologically, yeah, it's nice to say we're local, but like it's the same thing as the for students. Like, yeah, in concept that's cool, but is that really a selling point? Like, am I actually gonna buy it because it's local? And I would say, you're saying like you can only be local to one place. I think it is a legitimate marketing point of saying locally made, because to some degree that someone might think they're contributing to the local economy. And so that is more so a selling point than the whole buy students thing, because that isn't like a direct reason to buy something. Whereas I do think that saying it's locally made, it's not gonna like, I'm not gonna see that on a shelf, be like, oh, that's locally made, I'm buying that. I don't even need a candle, but I'm buying that. But it might help you choose this candle over other candles, because like you were saying, it's a very well established market already. And our candle is not all that unique, so we need to have the selling points that we can. And locally made is one of those things that there are very few locally made established candle companies that I know.
And also people take comfort in buying things that are locally made and have not been transported across the country or across the world for economic reasons, because obviously shipping things takes gas or another form of transportation, which probably uses gas as well.
And I think that the reason why we say locally is that is how we're going to start out. We're not some branch of a huge company that owns a whole bunch of brands that is now just putting out another product. We are just our own company making things, and maybe in the future when if word gets around and we start expanding, then we can try and keep that local air and stay in Seattle, but then we can start shipping to other places.
Mara, how long does the candle burn for? Because
15.5 hours.
okay, because if it's $9, you can go and see this per hour.
15.5 hours, yeah.
And you tested that, you actually heard it?
We did, well, no, we did a, how long does it burn for 1 gram, and then we did the
Yeah, it's an
math to figure out how much it burns overall. That's why we picked.
I have a question. So I know we had talked about that before, but did you use your original data that you'd gotten from your loyalty calculator at burn time?
Yeah.
So would you say, based on that, would the burn time be more or less in reality than what you were able to calculate? Like if I burned it on my desk, would it actually burn for 15.5 hours?
It could be a little bit more because I rounded down.
Also,
With it.
because we are in a glass mason jar, you're not going to have wax spilling over, and so nothing's going to get wasted. So it could burn more because of that reason.
Also, the wick was, I think, a bit shorter in the mason jar, and what could have caused the candle to burn faster was actually the wick burning, and so the shorter wick, I think, you have probably a longer time for it to burn.
Yes.
Do you know how many hours of an average student spends studying for say finals? So that how many you have to buy per year?
I think the average was 2 to 3 hours.
Or like a normal study session,
For like
and
a
then
section,
yeah.
like a day, or if they're taking breaks in between, we found lots of people like to condense them into 2, or, I mean, we had ranges from 1 to 3 hours, but the average was about 2 hours. And then people would usually take a break and go do something else, or wouldn't have time to continue studying for a long period of time, in which case they probably have to blow out the candle and then come back. So it was approximately 2 hours, although I know that some people take drastic measures and study for 6 hours straight, but we found that definitely on average it was about 2 hours per session of study.
So it would last through finals if you got it before finals.
Yeah, I'd say so. I know it would last.
Ideally,
through
as long as you
study
didn't do
so far.
15-hour study sessions.
David.
Alright, so I got a couple of questions. So when you say local, what about the materials to make the packaging? Where did those come from? Because I mean the mason jars, that's a pretty big company, so is that a local Seattle company that just happens to be pretty popular, or where do I mean, when you say local, does that just mean that you guys just ship out, or do you mean local by you get all of your materials? Because I mean, with that print, I mean, you're making labels that those labels are going to come from printers, which I'm guessing you guys don't have a printing press that you gathered from local materials in your area. So what do you mean by local? Do you mean as in you're shipping out, or do you gather all the materials for your packaging and the materials for your candles?
I mean, they're manufactured, the components of it are not.
So it's really
Yes,
not
but-
that eco-friendly.
What I think was that this could be our jumping off point, because once we start working our way up and we're able to have access to more sustainable local products such as
Like Glassy Baby for
Glassy Baby, for example, or finding soy wax that's local to beekeepers around here. Once we have a jumping off point from this and we have more revenue to spend on nicer ingredients, I think we're going to be able to expand on that whole local concept, but at this point it just means that we are based in Seattle.
Alright, and then my second question, or Sam, do you have a follow-up point to that? Alright, so you said with the candle it's going to be like a high school trend. So take silly bands, which were super cool in 7th grade. And I mean, silly bands were cool from about July to October, and then they just became pieces of crap. So what happens when when the candles are no longer a cool fad in school?
Well, our product actually has some kind of
A purpose.
yeah, it has a purpose. It's going to help you study. Silly bands, it was a trend because it was just around your wrist. We feel that this trend could be something that would last longer because of it has a functionality.
Okay, but everything dies out at some point, and you've got, I mean, what happens when?
The thing about our candle is that even if it dies out in the high school community, I think if high schoolers are bringing it into their house, their parents are going to be able to see it and realize that it's a concept that's applicable to them as well. Because, I mean, parents are working, people are working. It's not just students. I think it's for students. That is the concept. That is the base thing. But once that is our market, we've infiltrated it, it's become big.
Also, we're gonna show people, just because it's a trend, and
It'll
doesn't
expand.
mean, just because it's a trend, it's gonna find the people who really like it are gonna continue to buy it, not because they really like it and because it has a use in their lives. They're like, oh wow, this is really helping me study, I'm gonna continue to buy this, I'm gonna tell my friends about it. And so it would just have to catch on for a little bit, and people would start buying it, and then they'd actually buy it because they want the use of it, not just because their friends are buying it.
Lily?
I think your guys' presentation was amazing, and you guys were really good at answering these questions really confidently, so I would like to applaud you guys on that. It was really good.
Just a quick point. I really like the fact that you guys want to cater to specific issues that people have with studying. And you mentioned that you have different ideas for scents and colors for new product lines. So kind of to build off of what Gabe, your answer to Gabe's question about what would you do with $500, would that money that's going to research focus on what scents and colors are most beneficial to figuring out, suiting people's problems.
I think so.
Yeah, I think that is what we would do with electronics. Obviously, there's quite a bit of money, so it wouldn't be like $500 straight to research, but it'd probably be quite a bit of it going into testing things like that and seeing how our market would react to those kinds of changes and those kinds of options they had, and find what's popular, what might trend, what might not trend, and then using the other portions of money for different parts and testing different things.
Yeah, rather than trending, like show me that it works.
Yeah.
You know, show me that
So
it
that
helps
might
me
go
to.
towards that. That's part of our research, to go and test these candles with actual students while they're studying.
Who cares about trending? Your value here is if it improves my grade or improves my SAT scores. That's what I need to see. Then I'll buy it. You know.
Okay, so I was actually about to bring it back to that, and so I think it would actually be very beneficial, like if you were to have a set $500 in 2 weeks, and put that towards whatever you feel would differentiate you in like a already established, very well, like there are already large companies that have like the majority of the market is already taken, and I would think if we had $500, that would be very beneficial if we were going to put it towards like having definitive studies that it is beneficial to you. And because like I said, while it is a pre-established market, it is an untapped niche of students, and if we could definitively prove to them that this was like a necessity, that this was going to boost your grade, then I think, like you were saying, like trends die out. If you look at like the TI-83, that's like 10-year-old technology, but because it's viewed as a necessity and no one feels the need to change it, you can get a better calculator if you want. But because it's viewed as a necessity for something that you're going to be doing anyways, I think that would increase the longevity of the product.
I'd also like to say I thought you guys gave a terrific presentation and very clear and a lot of poise in responding to some tough questions. I have one last question for me anyway, and this is based on what Gabe said about going big. Do you all have an estimate, if you did go big and were to mass produce this product, how many of these you could make in, say, an 8-hour working day, and what would be another estimate? What would you estimate would be the average cost of producing this?
We still have to, for our expansion plan, part of it is we still need to find financials that would go behind it. We're having trouble figuring out, because right now we're just testing in a lab, and so it's like one person can maybe make 2 of these in an hour. And so our product cost is higher because of that. And so we'd probably have to buy machines. So some of our product, our profit would have to go towards that, but then our unit cost would go down.
Which right now is
yeah.
$426.
Yeah, so we're not quite sure because we weren't sure how much we would have to pay people. Sam worked on this section, so.
Another thing to factor into there is how many people would be working on making the candles, how many machines we would decide to buy, and what they would do, each one would end up doing for us. And I think that once you factor those things in, it will like very much change how fast it would go, or how many we could make, or how much we'd make in one set of mass-produced candles. And so based on those estimates, we could round out a price as well as a number that would be made in a workday.
Okay, so like you're saying, you're just asking like if we were to try and inflate it to a bigger scale, like do you know how our numbers would change? And the number we could produce in an hour, I think, is just a direct correlation with how big of a scale like we're thinking. And I'm not gonna lie and pretend I have like even a general estimate for that, because I'm honestly not sure like if we're going to move to a bigger scale, if our means of production would change and increase the number of products we could produce in an hour. But one of the things is I was working on financials, and I can say definitively that the price it costs us per unit would go down, because right now we are not buying in bulk. This is buying like each thing of paraffin wax in 10-pound units. And if we were to be an established company at that point on a larger scale, we could buy it directly in bulk. And all of the prices for every single component would go down. And just off the top of my head, I could say it would definitively go down at least $1 from almost the paraffin wax alone if you're buying in a much greater scale than 10 pounds per unit.
Did you
you also look at the college and university market?
Yeah, so we were considering adding this in originally as our target market, but we found that since we are high schoolers and we have access to, we wanted to make it a more refined market so we can be more precise about our surveys and studies. But our next step, we definitely wanted, before we even moved on to the workforce, we wanted to expand to all students. And I'm not sure how crazy middle school, I don't even know how much middle schoolers may need candles for focusing. I'm sure some may, but there is probably more of a market in college. So expanding to college, to middle school, to just, and then all the schools beyond that. And then beyond that, expanding to the workforce. Was our, yeah.
So, where did initially you guys come up with this idea, and then where did you discover which scents allegedly help with studying?
So we wanted to give candles a use because we thought most people don't really need them for light anymore or anything. So we were like, we really need to give people a use, and we want to sell a use here. And so we did some research, just normal articles, and we found some newspaper articles that talked about different scents activating the brains. We'd have to find more studies and put some of our profit into funding probably studies to show this. However, right now it's basically just like a couple, like 5 or so articles that back up different scents and what they do in your brain and how they activate it.
Okay, so you're saying you don't know if it's a placebo or not yet?
That's what we were saying. We would put, like, theoretically, we had $500 if we could find definitively to prove to people that this was a necessity. Because, like she was saying, when we initially looked at candles, we wanted to think of a way that we could make candles a necessity. Not for everybody, but for, like, if we could make candles in people's minds, like, a necessity to a certain group, then that would be a way to have longevity as well as sales. Like the silly bands analogy, that's not a necessity, that's something that's nice to have. And if you can convince someone to buy something that's nice to have, they're only going to buy it for so long because eventually they're not going to see a use for it.
Maybe if you can make it addictive.
Yeah.
Adderall candles.
Yeah. But we were thinking, like, what do we have, like, we're high school students, so the number of things we have, like, the knowledge about, or something we could say definitively that this would become a possible need, is only, like, expands to, like, being a student, which is what we ended up deciding on, and, like, a couple of hobbies between us is the only things we had enough, like, know-how about to decide definitively what we could turn into a need for a market. And we decided that the biggest possible untapped market would be students.
I think we have time for maybe one more question. Anybody have?
The only thing I'll say to that is when you have a solution like that, a problem like Gabe posed, how you really differentiate yourself, how you solve that problem, you guys got to really understand and say, this is what we can do.
That's why we like decided to put it on the, not this one, but our next one that was up there, with our 3 little paragraphs.
Yeah.
One is about the scent and what it does for you, and we thought that would be really important to show to our customers.
To give us that edge.
Just a really quick one. Why did you decide to do candles over soap?
Shay really wanted to do candles. Not just that, but a lot of groups are doing soap, and I don't know. I feel like our group felt that we could just stray from everything else.
Yeah, try something different than what's been done before.
We also thought that when doing candles, because they are easier than soap, that we'd be able to focus more on the marketing and our goal market instead of focusing on how to make a soap. Yeah.
You guys could expand to making soap and call it Soapus.
Think of what I'm sorry to do this.
Soapus.
Mara.
Just have a question. So, like, in terms of the aroma, do you have to like stick your face next to the candle to smell it, or does it like fill up with it?
I
I mean, it smells.
Does it like fill up a room?
While we were conducting the labs, we did, we made sure to do a test on how pungent our smells were. And potent, not pungent, sorry, wonderful. How potent our smells were, and so we made sure to pick something in the middle that people could, we did a wall was burning, so people could smell it, but it wasn't super faint, like they didn't have to go super close to the candle, but it wasn't going to like fill up the room and distract you from your work.
And be overwhelming.
So it's like here, you can smell it.
You can smell it, but it's
And
gonna
you're
be
still
like
getting
a
it.
nice smell, it's not gonna be like, oh god, like
we all
somebody
know that
spraying
smells
over
really
your
open,
house.
and
Yeah.
you're like, okay.
Thank you guys.